Okay, here's my implementation. First, we get the customer from the context. And note that I'm using the single method, not single or default. Because I'm assuming the client should be sending us the right customer ID, because the staff member will select this customer ID from a pick list or something. If a malicious user wants to send us invalid customer IDs, this line will throw an exception, and the malicious user will get a vague internal server error in the response. If you're building a public API that can be used by various applications, that's a different story. Then you would use single or default, like this, and check if customer is null, return bad request, and explain the reason for this error, invalid customer ID. But this API is not an external API. It's for internal use. So writing this additional code does not give us any value. It's just extra code to maintain. So I would rather to revert this back to the single method. Now similarly, we get the movies from the context. And note that I'm using a technique here to load multiple movies. So we have M goes to. Now instead of starting my comparison expression with M, I use new rental, .movieIDs, .contains, and then pass m.id here. This will translate to a SQL statement like this. Okay, so we get the movies, then we iterate over them, and for each movie, we create a rental object. We set the customer, movie, and date rented. We add it to the context, and finally, we save the changes. Now for now, I'm just returning an OK response. The reason I didn't call the created method is because in this action, we are not creating a single new object. And when using the created method, we need to supply the URL to the newly created resource. But in this case, we have multiple resources. So here's the simplest implementation and our happy path. Now we need to add the details. So as part of our rental process, we need to take into account the availability of a movie. Does our domain model currently give us the ability to keep track of the availability of a movie? It does, because in our movie class, we have this property, number in stock, and we also have the rentals for that movie. So availability equals number in stock minus active rentals. By active rental, I mean rentals that don't have a return date. Now, while this certainly works, I see a problem here. If we want to give a report to the user to see the movies that are not available, for each movie, we have to look up our rentals table to calculate how many active rentals we have for that movie. And as the data in our rentals table grows, we're going to see performance degradation. So I want to propose a different solution. But hang on a sec, is this premature optimization? Not at all. I know that as the data in our application grows, finding the unavailable movies is going to get more costly. It's obvious. We don't need any profiling here. And also, I told you about the importance of our database schema and queries. So let's take a look at an alternative solution and then we come back to a premature optimization again. What if we add a new property to our movie class called number available? So initially it's the same as number in stock. And when a customer rents that movie, we decrease it by 1. And subsequently, when the customer returns that movie, we'll increase it by 1. This way, we can quickly find all movies that are available or not available, and our queries will be less costly and also simpler. So I'm not going to sacrifice the maintainability of our application for premature optimization. With this solution, I will improve the maintainability of our application and optimize its performance at the same time. Premature optimization happens when you mess up with the code structure and make it unmaintainable for the sake of improving performance. But in this case, we're not going to do that. In fact, quite the opposite. We're improving the maintainability because our queries will be simpler and faster and less load on the database, which is extremely important when it comes to performance. So here's your exercise. I want you to make the necessary changes in our API to update availability for each rented movie. So as a quick tip, you need to add this new property to our domain model, update the database, and then modify the logic in our action. We'll review my code in the next lecture.